Hey everyone, this is Matt. I'm here with Ryan. Say hi, Ryan.
Hi, everyone.
So we're going to talk about generally what's known as the man box, and I'm going to define this briefly, and then we're going to share a little bit about how we've related to this in our past and our current. I was going to say future, um, maybe that too. So the man box, as many of you I'm sure know, is the idea that around grade 4, age 10, boys are starting to impress upon each other that they need to fit a kind of a mold of a kind of man. And so that could be a certain level of strength through athleticism, a certain amount of eventually being very comfortable with girls, anything that stays within the man box, especially it's easy when you think of like, as long as it's not a girl, that's where the policing happens. Pink is bad, anything that's too um, intimate in terms of like showing love, that can be seen as bad, that can be seen as only for girls. So these are things that Ryan and I will speak to what we've experienced. And let's just start, Ryan, with like why for you this is important as a topic.
Mm. Well, I am a sensitive man, and I grew up as a sensitive boy. And that meant that I felt things very strongly. Um, I picked up on nuances of energy, the way people responded to things, the way people had conversations. Um, so it's very impressionable as a young boy. And the kinds of reflections that I received growing up about boys and men was, those common ones we hear, just to be strong, to be in command,
Mm,
um, to be, um, to know what you're doing, never really show too much of your heart, or I wouldn't have said it like that at that time,
mm-hmm,
but not to be too vulnerable, to be very guarded. Um, play sports, be strong in sports, be good with women or girls, have a lot of friends, um, those sorts of things. So, what I found with myself was that I had a tremendous amount of inner conflict about all this because it was hard for me to be a lot of those projections and
mm-hmm,
ideas. It just didn't feel right. And I tried many times to do something like that, but it wouldn't work. So I had a lot of uh, conflict within myself about what do I do about this and how should I show up if it looks like I'm supposed to be like that, but I can't actually do it. And I was very conscious of that I wasn't able to really replicate what I was seeing. And so that inner conflict stayed with me through many parts of my adulthood in different ways. And it can still play a part, much less so now, but I can see threads of it sometimes, particularly about um, needing to know something,
mm-hmm,
have the answer to something. Um, you know, uh, Maybe having everything under control in a situation, being really calm or peaceful or discerning, or um, the one that um, doesn't doesn't cave with
mm-hmm,
conflict or anger or strong energy.
mm-hmm,
So those kinds of things still are with me. Um, but throughout that inner conflict was tremendously difficult. And when there's that much conflict inside, it's very hard just to be ourselves. It was hard for me to be myself and actually feel comfortable in my skin
mm-hmm,
and to feel comfortable to express myself, to really connect um, with others and to have a partner that I can connect to with my heart. I think I was always very kind to others, but not necessarily to myself. And that affected my ability to be intimate with another, to really feel someone's heart at a deeper level, particularly, different people that I've dated now, my current partner too. She really pointed that out to me, just areas of vulnerability that were difficult
mm-hmm,
because of this conflict of, I should be strong and making tons of money and we can go on and on about that. So Really getting clear on that and comfortable in myself was a very sacred journey.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna share my piece. Of course, I relate to a lot of what you said, Ryan. Um, so this is important to me because it feels like this man box construct that has I felt as a boy uh, culturally imposed through social networks of the boys around me, often in school, on the playground, a certain amount from relatives in my family. Um, it's important to me, I'll say more currently, and then I'll go in the past, that we be able to see this construct as a construct so that it can be something that any individual, when they're ready, can free themselves of it and be more feel more free to be who they are, whoever that is. So especially for people who identify as men, to not feel limited by a man box. For myself, I certainly felt, I think, especially around grade 6, I was feeling a lot of pressure from kids to be just kind of be cool, and that would take the role of like, a little stronger in athletics and like my inability to be comfortable around girls, like all I could do was be a clown, but I couldn't be anything that was like suave. Um, I started to get pushback from that. And so there's a lot of hurt in there from that time for me that we'll talk more about this today. It's not something I'm holding on too tightly anymore, but I did for a long time. And I too felt a lot of inner conflict and confusion around this. Um, it's I think now I'm age 50 and I'm still like moving through the last bits of it, let's say, or it's something maybe that'll always be there. But it's amazing to me that it's been such a long journey that I was in sixth grade, I must have been about 12. So it's almost 40 years of trying to release myself from that imposition of who I ought to be just because I'm a man. And I have a son. So this is important to me for him as well, that to whatever degree is possible, may I, may anyone who's interested in this be part of shifting the narrative, that cultural imposition, to something that's much more open, um, so that my son and others can experience the world as welcoming of whichever energy they are in touch with and include them as part of the hope for the future.
I love how you express yourself, Matt. I learned so much. So Matt and I used to work together and had a business together, and I learned so much about how to really get in touch with what's true in the moment,
Mm,
because I had so many guards up. And I remember the way you used to share with clients was very revealing,
mm,
and discerning too, but very revealing and honest. And I learned so much about, and I've taken that with me into my life since we've worked together,
mm,
um, into relationships, into teaching with students, into coaching. So many areas that it doesn't have to be scary
mm.
to be really honest and truthful and vulnerable. It can be actually be joyful, no matter
Yeah.
what it is. There could be a sense of joy and freedom with it. So
Hmm.
thank you for kicking this off.
Thank you. I love that reflection. I appreciate you for sharing that. Um, well, let's see what to go into. You had mentioned a phrase, reclaiming our lost parts. And maybe if we stick within the context of the man box and our own experience, what would you like to share, Ryan, with respect to lost parts that you've had to reclaim?
Yeah, even parts I didn't know were there because it starts so early.
Hmm.
Well, I would say that being a shy, uh, often hesitant, sensitive, somewhat quiet person that I think, like anybody, if we see ourselves in a certain way, then we're probably not going to see ourselves in the opposite way or think that that's possible to integrate or to find in ourselves.
Mm,
So I didn't see myself, I wasn't very outgoing, let's say, or expressive, or have a very commanding energy.
mhm,
And so those parts of me I hadn't claimed in myself, either in a positive way, but even understood them in a negative way. I guess what I would say with that is that if anyone in my life had a very dominant personality, you know, um, I would interpret that as really aggressive,
mhm,
and even if it's just outgoing, someone being outgoing, I could feel that energy so strongly that it felt like they were literally right here
mhm.
in my space, and
Like almost like a violation.
yeah, I felt like a
Yeah,
violation. Yeah,
yeah,
like, why are you in my space, even though they could be 20 feet away?
yeah.
But the energy of it is so strong. So, if there were any people, and this went all through adulthood, if there were people that had very strong, commanding energies, oftentimes my bosses throughout life had that kind of energy,
Mm,
women and men, then I could have either a slight or a big repulsion to that. And
mm,
then with that would come a story. Like, they don't understand me. They just want to talk. I'll never want to be like that because
mm,
that's going to have this kind of impact um, on other people. But each time I had a story and I wasn't really honest that that was a projection or a
mm.
story, that energy would get pushed down even more. And because of the interpretation I had of what that was. So, um,
When you
I
say
for,
that
mm,
energy, or you mean I was hearing that as like the potential for your voice to be a little more assertive. Is that what you mean?
that's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it would be hard for me to see that that was be a possibility
Mhm.
to have a stronger voice in the room, let's say at work,
Yeah.
or a clear perspective, or see myself as getting up and doing a talk, for example,
Mm.
and doing it. I would see people do that in a certain kind of way, not knowing that I could do that too in my own way.
Yeah.
It didn't have to look a certain way. So as I was, if I had stayed with those stories and kept projecting that out, then it's hard to really it would be hard to reclaim that more I don't know if I call it outgoing, but just more expressive part of
Mhm.
myself. Maybe it is outgoing. And that pushes down a lot of energy and it can create a depression
Mhm.
of sorts. And it can actually limit the potential to carry out a purpose here in life. And I found that I was always terrified of speaking in public. And um, one of many reasons why was because I felt I needed to show up in a certain kind of personality type to do that authentically,
Mhm.
because that's what I kept hearing. You need to show up in this kind of way to do a talk and to be successful.
Mhm.
And I couldn't fit in that form. My energy is just not that kind of form. But I had a very expressive part of me,
Yeah.
you know? It just may not fit in that personality type, but it can fit in this who I am.
Yeah.
So I can use that energy. So that took some time to say, well, I have a lot of energy and I have permission to I give myself permission to reclaim it, and it can um it can be the way that it comes out of me,
Mhm.
and I don't have to be this kind of person. I could be anything that's moving through. I could be quiet, I could be expressive, I could be, just witnessing. It doesn't have to look like anything. But until those parts are reclaimed, it's very difficult to be that multidimensional self.
Yeah. That's awesome. What I hear in there is I think you said projecting. It's the word I use a lot is judgment. That there's this it's not just that I see the other as this thing, but I see it negatively. And as I do that, I don't allow myself to look internally at what I'm either ashamed of not having. Like if I had a boss, especially a couple times, but one boss I'm thinking of right now that had a lot of assertive, and I felt it as aggressive energy, and I judged it. That's wrong. That's I even if that's supposed to be men, I don't like that kind of man. And it was often a rejection of that part of me. Like you said, pushing that even potential down and creating a kind of depression. It's super stifling.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I find that the depression was really subtle.
Hmm.
It wasn't a kind of depression where um, that I might hear about where I'm fully incapacitated. It was more of and not functional. It was more that I would just feel a sort of a dullness in life,
Mm.
which I think when I read your book a couple times, and I could feel the energy you were talking
Hmm.
about that way it can feel really dull. We can numb out so much, and that's what I had. Just a kind of like a kind of
Yeah.
flat line energy.
Yeah. Yeah. My that showed up for me as I mean, I'm still kind of monotone, but I try to break from that sometimes. But I think that's how it would show up for me a lot. And I would get feedback from people that in some scenarios that I would be putting them to sleep.
Huh,
So my pushing down of that energy was kind of creating a similar experience for other people. Like their energy was getting lowered as they just tried to tune into my words. It's fascinating.
yeah.
Um, I recognize that, you know, earlier in life, um, feeling like the energy of that character that became a boss later was like a bully figure for me in especially in sixth grade. And I'll share a story about this where like I basically moved to the US from Canada and I had already lived in the US, but I didn't know anyone when I came back. It was years later. So I'm there in sixth grade trying to start a whole new friend group. And I happened to live next door to a guy that was popular. And our parents agreed we should just walk to school together. And he was friendly enough to say yes to that. And so automatically I was brought into this like the highest level social clique possible in sixth grade. And it was, attractive people and athletic people and charismatic in all sorts of ways. And about a week later, they kind of discovered that I wasn't who they thought I might be. Like I was just the tag along. And instead, they turned on me. And like an example of this is one day showing up to school and like I could hear them snickering behind me and suddenly my pants were on the floor. And I was
Mm,
so embarrassed. And it was just like rejection of like, no, Matt, you're not cool. You're not one of us. You don't really fit. I didn't think of it as man box at the time, but it kind of checks those boxes, so to speak. Um, and that hurt and that stayed with me, that kind of rejection. That felt like not just a rejection from their group, but it felt like a rejection of who I was. And so I think from that point forward, for many years through high school, um, kept a lid on my expression because it felt dangerous. If I expressed too much, there's too much possibility of that kind of rejecting from the community, whoever the community was.
mm, yeah, I could see that. It's just such a powerful and almost heart-wrenching episode in a moment can affect, can have such a downstream or an upstream, however you want to see it, um, path in
Yeah.
your life. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, the just to go on that thread a little bit more, like that bully energy was how I experienced the pushback. It wasn't generally quiet, it was overt physical. So in middle and high school, getting pushed into lockers by bigger kids, sometimes even younger than me, but bigger than me, and having like a thin frame and possibly walking with my head a little lower, I was an easy target. They could see this is not someone who's gonna fight back. That was true.
Could I ask you a question about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, what's your because I have a story I want to share too, and I'm just curious what concept or belief you took on in that moment that, carried through for a while.
Yeah. Well, one is that I'm not strong. Um, and that generally I have to be guarded against whenever I encounter, I mean, it was mostly the guys. So whenever I encounter someone I don't know that's a man, I have to be guarded. And it would not be safe to do anything but posture, especially as tough, so that I wouldn't be attacked.
Mm, yeah. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah. Let me pass it back to you. Maybe there's something you would like to share.
Well, as you were sharing that, I was thinking about even just recently. I don't. Let's just say, I was bullied as a child, in different ways, and I don't feel that anger or um, I don't feel anything towards the people that did that. And
Was that
you know,
always true, or you mean
no, it
now?
wasn't. No,
Okay.
definitely not. Yeah, I held on to that. But I do have programmed habits that show up
Mm,
still. So, for example, I was just taking a trip. My partner and I were just taking a trip to, oh yeah, to Hawaii. Just a few weeks ago, and I saw a woman with her baby, super cute, and then a husband staying next to them, and he had what I would interpret and perceive as an armor.
mm,
So it was a very stark difference between the two energies. Here's a woman holding her baby, and just there's a sweetness emanating from
mm,
the two, and then the men had more of a stoic look, and and we were passing by, and Miriam was just looking at the baby, and she's bothered by all that stuff. She's like, hey, and then we're passing by, and I could feel the sweetness in me, and then I was passing by the man, and we kind of stopped next to each other, and I could feel a part of me wanted to match him
mm.
to feel safe, like also guard or look a certain way, let's say
Yeah.
stoic or guarded or strong, let's say
Mhm,
strong. And I had to really catch myself because I could feel it didn't feel good in myself to have that judgment, because there was
mhm.
judgment underneath and fear, but just to accept it in the moment. And I didn't I think I felt like I gave him one of those, hey, like, when you're not totally in your heart, which I
Yeah.
don't do anymore, right? At least I didn't think I did anymore. And then here I am just watching myself go, hey. And then I passed by him, and Miriam goes, hi. She wasn't affected at all.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's so interesting, because that still lives in me. The the how quick I can match something to feel safe, another energy to feel safe.
Mm,
And that um, I have to have a practice of softening. I don't have to, but I choose to have a practice of softening that just feels better in me, and to know, oh, I am safe.
mhm,
No matter what someone is holding, projecting, or I'm interpreting, that I can breathe and soften my body, my shoulders, and even if it's just passing someone, and respond in a way that just feels better.
mm.
And then so I went first, and then she did it, and he just had this big smile, you know, and I could feel a little bit of shame in me, like, oh man, one more area to practice.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Yeah, I've seen that in myself too. There are times, and that you put it really well. I like that it's a matching energy. Um, Not to say that it, I'll say it as me, I accept that matching as my choice to respond rather than like, oh, well, he was doing it. So, um, yeah, I've had moments like that and felt wondering like, oh, that's interesting. Why was I kind of doing more of like the bro version of myself? And um yeah, and I can see that like it's sort of a safer route. It it could feel safer.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was very humbling,
Yeah.
because I think you probably see this too, how much you've, healed along the way, and I can
Mhm.
see how much has been healed, and there's just a continuous journey, keep finding of as I get to these, let's say, milestones or points where something has really dropped away,
Yeah.
that there is just another piece to look at, a more subtle level of being
Yeah.
myself.
This is so meta. Like I'm noticing because of that kind of boy to boy policing energy, the uh response fits within that framework for me. So I could even police myself from that place. Like, oh, it's not okay to have that bro energy, which I would love to feel okay about, like as and in like that any version of a man is cool, is acceptable. And I wouldn't say that if it were about like a violence, overt or implied or systemic, all that. But just with regard to the way a man chooses to hold himself, and then who I be in response to that, that's my stuff. And often as an empathic kind of person, I will probably lean towards matching more often. And I can say proudly the last 2 weeks or so, as my kids have started a new school, I'm getting to interact and walk by all these women and men, the parents dropping their kids off, and I'm paying special attention and noticing it's not a big push or effort, but when I walk by a lot of men, I just allow myself that kind of openness, that playful, like, hey, and it's great to see the responses. Sometimes there isn't the same response. I'm like, cool, that's him in that moment. That's who he is. And then sometimes I get a big smile, and that's like, oh, that's nice too. Um, so yeah, I wanted to name that as well.
And I want to share one thing, because I really love how you're reflecting on this and framing it. Um, how important it is for me to notice the judgment of another way,
Hmm.
and it should be this way, the way I'm working on versus the other
Yeah.
way. Right?
Yeah.
Which it's just one more method of getting into a spiral of judgment
Hmm.
and constriction, and versus looking at the way that you're saying, which is, oh, it's a choice in the moment for me, and it's just allowing someone to be what is ever being expressed in the way they're doing it. There's
Hmm.
nothing that needs to be judged.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if the man box were essentially a one-dimensional idea, I would love to see a multi-dimensional idea instead, which
Mhm.
includes that one dimension. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, there's going to be men who are totally into muscles and babes and cars and money, and
yeah,
cool. If
that's
that's wonderful for you, and let's add on what else is
yeah.
cool as well.
I find that I'm as I go on social media at
Hmm.
times, sometimes more than I want to, and sometimes less. But when I go on now, I'm not as triggered by the kinds of things you just mentioned.
Hmm.
I think because as I'm reflecting, I think because there is more acceptance of well, first of all, my own innocence and my heart, and the shadow and the darker sides, and also just paying attention to that, like always asking, well, why am I triggered by someone showing muscles, you know,
Hmm.
or whatever they're doing. It's not about them, like what's really happening inside myself.
Hmm.
So I am finding that that's a really good continue to look at that in myself,
Oh
what's
yeah,
really going on.
nice. That's a great practice. Hmm. I'm gonna look at my notes for a minute because I don't remember where we might go next. Oh yeah, this is interesting. So I was gonna share that. it would be easy to stand here and go like, I was the bullied one. I'm kind of like the victim here. I'm sensitive new age guy, and now like the new world is for me. Versus like, okay, I'm learning about what's true for me. Um, I'm living alongside many men, and they're gonna have their own flavor. And I'm gonna admit that I have taken on that bully energy, and I'll explain in a story so that we can understand what we mean. So there are two cases, and it's interesting how this showed up first for me, one in middle school and one in high school. So after that sixth grade experience, got into middle school. For me, that meant seventh, eighth, and ninth grade in middle school. And during that time, my way was to continue to be a clown and keep my head low. I didn't have friend groups. I noticed when there were other people who were um, I could sense weakness in other people. And when I sensed that I could be in a position of power by making them, by showcasing their weakness, then I might take that opportunity because it was a way for me to not be at the bottom of the ladder, which is, it's an awful feeling for anyone to be anywhere other than just feeling good about yourself. So there was like a foreign exchange student, I think, who came into our class and I didn't realize at the time what I was doing, but later I realized I was really picking on her and I was making her uncomfortable. I didn't physically go after her, which would have been a horrifying memory, but I was doing enough like psychological weird stuff to say things to her out loud that me and my friend could snicker about. Friend being actually not friend after school friend, but like the other kid who I would maybe say we both felt weak. We were looking for someone to torment so we could not feel as weak. Same thing in high school. It happened to be a guy who was foreign. And there was something interesting about that he didn't quite know the norms of social etiquette, and I saw weakness and I made fun of him. And it wasn't like I cared about him and I wanted to be jokey with him. It was I wanted to put him down a notch so I could feel up a notch. And that it didn't I didn't realize that until maybe 10 years ago. Like that means decades passed before I could own up to that reality that I also know what it's like to be a bully. I'm not just the one on the other side.
So important. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Matt. Um, I feel like I was getting a um, reflection from my own life that's similar because
Hmm.
well, let me ask you this. As you started realizing that and looking at that, like what has it done to just acknowledge that? What's it done inside of you?
I mean, the first thing I had to face was shame. There was like, oh my God, this goes against my identity as a nice person. Um, since then, I think it was part of enjoying the reality of the projecting that it
Mm,
would be easy for me to go like, oh, there's a bully over there. I don't know anything about that because it wouldn't be true. And as I would get triggered by people, whether on social media, like you said, or anywhere, I will often wonder, like, well, what am I upset about in what I see? What am I upset at that actually lives in me in some way, even if it doesn't live in me the same way? What version of that lives in me?
mm,
And now what can I do about that? Because I don't have control over another person necessarily, but I can address the energy of trigger that is probably pointing back at me to say, well, take a look, take a deeper look at yourself. Even if you're not a political figure, even if you're not a leader of a company, there's something there that you can see as a human being that lives in you.
mm, mm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's it's helpful to hear this. Yeah, I think I want to share something that's coming to me
Yeah.
too. I think the way so I had a similar experience. You know, there's sort of a pecking order in elementary school and certainly high school. Um, and in elementary school, like I said, I was uh, bullied and hit and made fun of, and I was sort of in this group of maybe four, 4 people that were considered, not cool. Let's put it
Mm.
that way, and often ignored or made fun of as well. And I could tell that I wasn't as made fun of as a couple of the others.
Mm,
And there was almost like a terror in being the last, just the ultimate, the most picked on.
mhm,
Just to being at the, let's say, the my perception at that time, the bottom of the barrel.
mm,
And I think the way and I reflected on this for many years and felt a lot of shame about it. The way I reacted to that or responded to that was to ignore them. I would
mm,
feel a repulsion to them, even though we weren't necessarily friends or hang out together, but we could share a common experience that
mhm,
sometimes we shared and sometimes it was sort of like a push pull with me. Sometimes I would connect with them and sometimes not.
mhm.
And I think the more pain I was in, the more I would feel repulsion with them and just ignore them or not want to even be seen talking to them.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a inverse bullying. It was ignoring, you
Mhm,
know. And it also came out as maybe not towards them, but others as wanting to achieve a lot, you know. Like,
mm,
"Oh, I'm better than them," or "I'm better." That's kind of the strategy I took was I'm better than whoever, and I need to do these things to um, really solidify a stronger standing, so I don't appear so weak to everyone.
yeah.
So that had to be cleaned up too.
Mhm,
Not just the energy that came at me, but also, like you're saying, what part of the equation here, am I contributing to?
yeah, yeah, like, let's say man box, and I played a part in that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Mm. Um, as you were speaking, I got a hit to go in a slightly different direction, so I'm gonna share something that came to me. The word repulsion really stood out, um, and I have this is not a historical view. I'm not a historian or sociologist or anything, but I have this sense, and it feels like just a story to share, which is that it's possible that a long time ago, when we lived in tribes, that there were good reasons to fear a man who was seen as weak and even be
Mm,
repulsed. That is to say that if I lived in a warring tribe and I needed to feel as if all the men around me were there to have my back in battle, I might actually feel like I'd want to reject the one who seems like they weren't fit for battle because that would make me unsafe and I could die.
mm,
And in that kind of culture, depending on the amount of emotional intelligence or spiritual intelligence, it could be that without some of that, I might actually have a lack of care for that other person as well. And I might be stressed by going into battle and my own life being on the line and knowing that other
mm,
people might want to kill me tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So those are things that I think, like, if I wonder, like, what are the good reasons that a man might be repulsed by another man perceived as not fitting the man box or weak? And what are the good reasons why a man might close his heart? Those are two that are very old,
mhm,
archaic reasons that wouldn't apply today, but we're not that old as a human species. So I can imagine the genealogy of that coming
mhm.
through and sticking around.
Yeah, it makes sense, Matt. I think what comes to me is fear, just the word fear,
Hmm.
and the way you're talking about it, I can feel like a compassion for the person that is doing the bullying. Let's put that category, bullying or
Yeah.
rejection of someone else.
Hmm.
Um, every the way that you're showing that, and really, I think this is the case for bullying, is they're underlying just a deep-seated fear about something
Hmm.
of survival, of um, perceived of love, something going to continue to receive love in some way,
Hmm.
of lack of usefulness in some way.
Hmm.
So, if any of those things are threatened, then the one who seems to be threatening it, there can be a repulsion to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly the state of consciousness of that group or the collective or whatever is a factor in that.
Yeah.
Seeing someone as an other, but also, yeah, it's a much of survival, it just kind of carries on
Yeah.
survival kind of mentality or reality
Hmm.
sometime.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. What let's talk about practices that we have engaged in, maybe one or two. We can start with you, one or two practices you engage in related to welcoming back those parts, reclaiming them. And maybe you do this as a coach with your clients as well.
Mm. Well, one of the most helpful for me is to acknowledge and accept that there is a part there in the first place. Um, because and so there's a way that I do that for myself and may help clients. But the idea behind it is that if I'm rejecting anything in myself, I'm at war.
Mm,
And it's the warring mentality and embodiment, let's say, that makes it hard to really experience true freedom here
mhm,
for anyone, or true aliveness, or deep peace, or, a natural state of joy. So that inner conflict with any part can create a kink in the system, um, internal system. So, when I'm working on my own self, I'll look at anywhere there's like a feeling tone now I have where I feel like I'm rejecting something or repulsing. It's there's a sensation of repulsion. So
mhm,
that's a practice is um, where am I? What does repulsion feel like inside of me? Where is it located?
mm,
And when am I having it? Where am I having it? With whom am I having it? And then just to acknowledge that, and then to say, this is okay.
yeah,
This is okay to have this. And I think your book has that transmission really, really well. Just that whole energy of this is okay.
mm,
Once 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 we see things in ourselves that we didn't want to see, that were under the rug, the first step really is it's okay to have that.
mhm,
You know. And so I always have that with myself and my clients is just a practice of saying it's okay. Even it's okay that I'm not okay with this. You know, and that'll kind of bring in some humor for me or
yeah,
for clients. Yeah, like it's okay. You're not okay. Oh,
yeah,
okay, right? Because ultimately, we want the nervous system to relax.
yeah,
There's no healing without a relaxed nervous system. So um, that framing is very helpful for me
mm,
to do that um, in that practice. And then another one is I always remember that someone. Okay, so you and I went to the same coaching school,
mhm,
and the person that started it, James. I remember someone asked him one time, like, how do you, when someone's, I don't remember the exact question, but when someone's having difficulty in a coaching session, like, how do you coach them? And
mm,
he drew these two circles, like one circle and then a circle around it, and then it was a bigger circle. He said, the outer circle is the persona,
mhm.
the middle circle is the shit soup, and the inner circle is the essence. He's like, always speak to the essence.
Mm,
Don't get caught in the shit soup or the personality. You can still have a persona that you use, but don't believe it or get caught in it. Speak
mm,
to that light inside of them.
yeah,
So that's what I do continually is, and I can't do that unless I feel my light
mhm,
or I have a way of connecting with it that I can relate to, because everyone relates to the word light differently, or or the feeling tone of
mhm,
light or inner light. But I have a way of connecting it with it, and I help people find their own way. And then how to, if it's another person, how to remember that they have that in there
mm,
beyond everything, and to see them as a little child, first of all,
yeah,
beyond the bigger adult version they are, and to see that if they have to use a visual, to see them as a child, a very scared child
mhm,
with an inner light. It's a lot easier to see an inner light in a child. So
yeah,
those are probably two practices that come to me right now.
nice. Those are great. Okay, yeah. So let's see. One of my practices relates to whenever I think of developing something in myself, I have a kind of check that is to say, am I wanting this because I think other people will like me? Or am I wanting this because it feels truer to another part of me that, regardless of what people think, I just want this? So, with the stuff I said before, like, I don't relate to the money muscles babes kind of thing. But there was a time in my life when I really wanted to feel more comfortable with women. And so I allowed myself authentically to move in that direction, to be curious, like, what do I have to learn here? And
Mhm.
may this serve me, may this serve others, so that I don't just continually reject all the things that are part of that first dimension, manhood. Um, that's one thing. And then the other is very much along the lines, like you mentioned, nervous system regulation. That's on my mind these days a lot. So 3 or 4 times a day, I get a note on my, or an alarm or notification on my phone that says, "How's your nervous system?" And it's like a check, like,
Yeah.
am I in one of those states? Am I actually in a bit of a fight flight state, or a bit of a freeze state, or a shutdown state, or I'm actually more in a ventral, like I feel safe state? And now knowing that, how can I support my nervous system? What will the next 3 minutes be just in support of that? And that means I'm not doing other stuff. I'm not being productive. Um, Unless you think, your nervous system is important and that's part of being productive. So those are both important to me, the framework of what am I going to develop in myself authentically from an authentic place of peace rather than shame or standards from others, and how's my nervous system doing so that I make good decisions as I go.
Mm. Um, I just want to reflect on one thing that you were
Yeah.
saying. I love everything you said about the nervous system. I could feel my whole body relaxing. First of
Mm,
all, it's like permission. And then the first thing you said about accepting men who have that desire for, let's say, building muscles or being
yeah.
stronger. And what I love about that, the way you expressed it, was there was a sense of wonder,
Mm,
curiosity, or just God, that's so interesting.
mm,
There's no judgment in it. It's just um, how do I describe this? There's a wonderment that can come in a lot of things that we judge
mm.
about. Oh, that's so interesting. This person is pursuing this path. How interesting. How interesting. Generally,
Yeah.
I wonder why. What's motivating, inspiring. Um, and I got that energy from you as you were sharing that.
Mm, nice. Yeah, that feels good. Curiosity is a nice frame for any development. Mm. Uh, Final words, Ryan. Just kind of maybe wishes or hopes for people listening.
Mm. Well, if this resonates on some level for people, and it's easy to do, then I congratulate you. It's just keep being yourself. I think it's such a beautiful energy to be vulnerable and open and honest and authentic. Even if we're not speaking, we could still radiate that energy.
Mm,
And if it's difficult or somewhat difficult, um, I think just to know that it's like any practice, uh, that it really does, from my experience and people I work with, it does get easier. And there is a genuine sense of freedom with that vulnerability. And each time I've noticed that I allow myself to be real and honest and open-hearted, regardless of what's happening out here, it breaks something down in me.
mm,
And there's just something reclaimed. There's more energy. There's more
mhm,
creativity. There's more aliveness for life. And so that's what I want to leave with is even if it's difficult and you find yourself shaking, that there's such unclaimed energy from that behind that shaking. And
mm,
to allow just to be step by step, just small steps can just bring a whole river of life.
mm. Well said. Maybe I'll tack on to what you're saying, uh, to say how important it has been for me to be compassionate towards myself as I move towards things that are scary, as I just live day to day in moments that are hard for me. And even the intention of being tender with others, from a projecting standpoint, or tender with myself as I try hard things or things that feel like they should be easy, but they're not, to continue to be compassionate. And also, when I fail to be compassionate, to then be compassionate towards myself. uh, like at any level, it's always a nice place to land. It's always possible to land back in compassion.
Beautiful. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, it was great having this conversation with you today, Ryan. Thank you for this.
Likewise. Yeah, it was a real joy.
Right on. For those of you who just watched, here's something I put together about the book that you can see, which is including illustrations I made and a little bit about the journey of sensitivity from another angle. So enjoy. Have you ever felt like you couldn't open up to men? Like men weren't emotionally available? Ever kept your distance from a man to protect yourself? Or thought, he doesn't really care about me? Now imagine having those thoughts and being a man. That's been my experience. For a long time, I couldn't even trust myself. I struggled to share what I was feeling inside. I distanced myself from other men and even from my own emotions. I judged others for not being man enough and felt judged in return for the same reason. You know what? I'm not alone, and neither are you. A standard based on gender controls how we see ourselves and others. It's a standard, which means someone else made it up. And it's understandable how we could fall for this. Maybe you were taught to follow the rules of being a man, even though they felt constricting or impossible to meet. Maybe you got the message that even though you were being coerced or shamed into acting a certain way, you needed to keep all of that to yourself. Because one of the manhood rules is that you should not be affected by their existence. And another rule is that you can't fail at manhood, which means you can't speak up when these rules are ruining your life. Today, feelings about this inner conflict might still be hiding inside you. But listen, even if you feel this inner conflict, there's nothing wrong with you. So many men feel the same way. I'm Matthew Sloane. I wrote and illustrated a book called Hiding Inside a Man, Finding Strength in Self-Compassion. This book is for men like me, men who have thought, my way of being a man isn't good enough for the limiting standards others have set for me, so under all this pressure, how might I allow myself to be the man I was meant to be? If this resonates with you, I invite you to support my Kickstarter. Your pledge helps bring this book to life. You sharing this video may encourage more men to find strength in self-compassion. Thank you for playing a part in this vision.